Hello, friends. Father Frank Pavone here, National Director of Priests for Life. Welcome to our program. This is a series of episodes where we are exploring the Dobbs case, the Supreme Court case on abortion arising out of Mississippi, which passed a law saying that babies in the womb would be protected from 15 weeks of development forward. Now, many pro-life organizations, including us at Priests for Life, have submitted friend of the court briefs to the Supreme Court in this case in support of Mississippi. These briefs are documents that develop one or another arguments supportive of this side of the case. So we're going to talk about yet another one of these important documents today and help you understand the arguments that are behind them. We're going to talk today about a brief submitted to the court by our friends at CareNet. CareNet is a large affiliation or network of pregnancy centers, and we have the Chief Outreach Officer of CareNet, Vincent DeCaro, with us today. Vincent, welcome, and thank you for coming on the program.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
And you've, of course, been right here to our main office at Priests for Life in Titusville, Florida. We're always glad to have you when you can make it. And
it's nice to have an excuse to go to Florida.
Yeah,
that's
so
right. I appreciate that.
Especially in the winter. I think we had that leaders meeting in February.
We did.
But it's always good to see you, whether it's at CareNet conferences or other meetings around the country. Thanks for your work. And for our viewers, before we get into the substance of this excellent document that you submitted to the court, let's remind our viewers and listeners what CareNet is.
Sure. Yeah. So CareNet is as you mentioned, that was a nice summary you gave there. We're an organization that has a network of 1,200 affiliated pregnancy centers around the country. We also operate a hotline called the Pregnancy Decision Line, which provides immediate pregnancy decision coaching to women and men at risk for abortion. So that's a hotline that's able to reach folks who are doing a Google search and looking for information about abortion or pregnancy or whatever it might be in related items, and then they're able to call into that hotline and have one of our coaches actually walk them through and hopefully help them through that decision right there on the phone. So that's a really unique, great service that we provide as well. And then something that is near and dear to your heart, Father Frank, is our program to equip churches to minister to women and men at risk for abortion. And so from CareNet's perspective, we love pregnancy centers, right? That's our bread and butter in a certain sense. But we kind of had this revelation a few years ago that it can't just be pregnancy centers doing this work. Churches need to be involved as well. The church is the seat of discipleship. And, the body of Christ, the gates of hell shall not prevail against the church. And so, gates don't move, so the church needs to be moving. So we're really trying. We have a program called Making Life Disciples to equip people in the church to actually do the kinds of things that are done at pregnancy centers and to help, form better relationships between local pregnancy centers and local churches so they can create even more of I don't know if the word safety net is necessarily the right term. A love net, I think, is better. A source of love and compassion and help and support for people in the community that's not just supported by pregnancy centers, but also local churches as well. So those three things are really how CareNet carries out what we call our pro-abundant life mission. So we like to say that we're not just pro-life, which is obviously great. We need to be pro-life, right? Save babies from abortion. But we're also pro-abundant life in that we want to make sure that we're helping people form strong, God-honoring families, preferably a mother and a father united in marriage, loving each other, loving God, and loving their children. And we also want to make sure that we're involving men in this and promoting family, but also spreading the gospel of Jesus Christ as well. And so for us, it doesn't just stop with saving the life of an unborn child, which of course is where it all has to start, right? But for us, that's just the beginning, because there's a family that needs to be formed. There are folks that need to become disciples of Jesus Christ. And that's kind of how CareNet looks at it in terms of a pro-abundant life perspective. So that is CareNet.
Well, I was very excited when the Church Outreach Project began some years ago. In fact, the leadership team there at CareNet invited me to a private meeting where they laid it all out for me, explained it to me, and I lent my support for that from the very beginning.
Yes.
In fact, as I think you know, the relationship we at Priests for Life have with CareNet goes back decades, back to into the 90s, where Guy Condon was president and used to come on various retreats that we held for pro-life leaders, and we established various forms of collaboration from way back then. So it's a nice, long, fruitful relationship in the Lord, and we applaud your work and thank you for it.
Absolutely, it's our pleasure.
Okay, so now you got these centers working together and ministering every day to the needs of moms and dads who are afraid of an unexpected pregnancy, and that's frontline work. That's work that people can certainly appreciate on both sides of the issue. And now the Supreme Court decides to hear a major case on abortion. And lo and behold, CareNet is right there in the midst of making these legal arguments to the courts. Let's start with this before we get into the arguments themselves. What is it that led CareNet to decide to jump in as a friend of the court on this case?
Yeah, like I said, our perspective really lends itself to wanting to make sure that we're protecting life however we can, and whatever way it's practical for us to do so. And because we have pregnancy centers that are operating on the ground every single day, ministering to people, the laws in our nation, and obviously federally and state laws, can certainly affect their ability to do their work, right? So certain laws make it harder for pregnancy centers and churches, frankly, to do what they need to do in order to serve women and men at risk for abortion. So when certain opportunities arise, even though we're not a quote unquote legislative advocacy organization, we're a ministry, but we're not naive to the fact that laws do impact our ability to do our work or make it harder or easier, depending on the case. And so in this case, we said, this is something where we have a perspective. Obviously, the law firm that we worked with on the amicus brief had a perspective that we shared. And we felt that it would just be helpful to make the legal landscape a little bit easier, hopefully, for pregnancy centers and churches and others to do ministry work.
Now, reading this brief, and I think it's excellent, brought, of course, front and center some mutual friends and colleagues of ours. First of all, Harold Cassidy, tremendous pro-life attorney. He, too, has been associated with us here at Priests for Life for literally decades. Harold has done such great work over the years. And then also our friends in South Dakota, Dr. Allen and Leslie Unruh, who run the Alpha Center. They have come in on this brief with CareNet. And let's just trace the argument here. Harold has been working on this for many years, and it's an approach that doesn't simply take account of the right to life of the baby. Of course, people know that's our primary pro-life argument. The baby has a right to life, should be protected under the law. But Harold looks at another right which it's been acknowledged to exist by the courts, but it hasn't been brought into the abortion debate in the way that Harold and this brief bring it in. And that is, the mom has a right to the relationship with her child. And what Harold unpacks here is that abortion actually destroys that right. And the getting an abortion is not so much the exercise of a right on the part of the mom, but the waiver or the surrender of a right to her relationship with her child. That's it in a nutshell. But tell us from your perspective, how this argument unfolds.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great summary, and I'll start there and then I'll work backwards to I think one point that's also important to make. So as you said, an abortion is so. I think it's just a brilliant and sort of ironic argument, right? Because typically when we're talking about the Constitution and abortion, we typically, what we hear is that there is a right to abortion in the Constitution, and that is, the equal protection, right? And so, specifically, it's the due process and equal protection, right? Those are the rights that are brought up by folks who are advocates for the legality of abortion. And they would say
Right.
that those are the rights that the mother has that actually should allow her to have an abortion. Right. And what Harold Cassidy is articulating here, and what this amicus brief, I have the official copy here, is that green color that every amicus
That's
brief
right.
it's beautiful. But is that actually it's the rights that we actually should be focused on. So rather than sort of trying to fudge constitutional rights to make them seem as though they apply to abortion, what we're doing with this amicus brief is actually saying that no, there actually are rights that women have, and that actually is a right to a relationship with their child, and abortion actually violates that, right? So it's actually using constitutional rights to actually argue the opposite of what the abortion advocates would argue for, right? So that is really the crux of the argument. But the other part of the argument that I think is foundational to make that all work is that, abortion is unique, as we know, in a lot of ways, right? But one way in which it is unique is that it is a medical procedure that is employed to achieve a non-medical result, which is the termination of a human life, right? And so as a result, the termination of that human life is what is essentially causes the breaking of that relationship between the mother and her child. And what pro-abortion laws have done is basically they've blocked or prohibited states, right? So if there's this federal law coming down from the Supreme Court that essentially says that you must operate under this framework, Roe and Casey and other laws have essentially blocked states from being able to protect a woman's right to her relationship with her child. And again, ironic, right? Because the pro-abortion legal advocates would say that Roe and Casey protect a woman's right to privacy and equal protection, which means that she can have an abortion. But what we're saying is actually, no, it's the opposite, that these laws actually block states from protecting a woman's actual constitutional right to her relationship with her child. So I hope I didn't make it more complicated, but that's essentially what the amicus brief is arguing.
That's right.
Because a woman has a fundamental right to a relationship with her child, and because there are so many coerced abortions, whether it's directly coerced, like you have to have this abortion or else, coming from another person, or if women are coerced by circumstances, right? They feel like they have no choice, which is actually what you hear from, I don't know what the percentage is, but it is a significant majority of women. When they're talking about why they had an abortion, they often say, more often than not, I felt like I did not have a choice. And then, so if you take that fact into account, and then the fact that there are so many coerced abortions that take place, the laws that are in place now are because abortion is not really a real choice, right? So women's right to their relationship with their child is being taken away from them because they're essentially being forced, in a sense, or coerced by circumstances or other things to have an abortion. And it is the state's obligation to protect that right.
Well, as you know, of course, the work of the pregnancy centers, when they're coming in for counseling and so forth, one of the things they're being told in the centers is, hey, meet your baby. Look at your baby. Look at that. And that to me is one of the key things here too, because, when states pass laws, for example, that say, she should be given information, whether from the state or some other source, to show her who her baby is at this point of development, show her the reality. In some states, as you know, Vincent, the law says even that she should be given the chance to see the baby on the ultrasound or hear the baby's heartbeat. What this is doing is reminding her something that she might not really know, how much of a child her child already is.
Right.
And if the courts start blocking, as they sometimes do, those kinds of laws, it's like, well, wait a minute, she has a right. A part of her right to the relationship with her child is to know that the child is there in the first place.
Right.
And This is where now this brief has been being done in conjunction, as we said, with our friends in South Dakota. So one of the things Alan and the South Dakota, not Alan, Harold Cassidy. I'm
Yes.
thinking of another pro-life attorney, Alan Parker.
Right,
but
yes.
Harold Cassidy and our friends in South Dakota have done is they won, as you know, a case in the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals that actually upheld a law currently in effect in there in South Dakota that says the abortionist has to tell that woman before she has the procedure that this procedure destroys a whole, separate, unique, living human being.
Right.
And Planned Parenthood said, "Oh, that's just ideology," And the court said, "No, that's scientific fact. It's not ideology." Isn't that fascinating? And of course that ties in strongly to this argument, doesn't it? Because if she has to be told that, what the state is doing again is protecting her relationship to her child, her right to say, "Wait a minute, I want to preserve my child instead of kill my child."
Right, and I think that's just so critical to this argument because really at the end of the day, what it comes down to is rights, right? And so so even if you argue that a right, there's a right to an abortion in the Constitution, which many legal scholars are obviously calling into question, but even if you concede maybe there is, right, but that doesn't mean that there aren't other rights, right? So in a certain sense, it's competing rights, right? So which rights are more important and fundamental and clear and spelled out and just central to the Constitution and to case law, right? Jurisprudence, and over the last 2 centuries, right? And what this amicus brief again is arguing that a woman's right to her relationship with her child is actually core and central and the most important right that we're talking about in this context. And as you said, with states, attempting to protect that right to that relationship, being told because of Casey and Roe, no, you can't do that. That's too restrictive. That's precisely why this amicus brief is making the argument that it's making. It's actually saying, no, there's a right here that you're forgetting about, that you're actually violating. States need to be able to protect that right, not just this other right that you kind of made up, frankly, about a right to an abortion under equal protection. So
the brief brings up the 38 states and the federal government actually recognizing as criminal homicide the killing of an unborn child in the womb, in the context, of course, outside of abortion.
Right, that's right.
Driver, hits a car and so forth. And in 30 of those jurisdictions, it actually applies from conception. So, I mean, it's like we're at an amazing point in our society where we recognize more than ever before the reality of the child in the womb.
Yeah.
And to a large extent, the rights of the child in the womb. And it's that recognition that, hey, this is a real child owed some respect and protection. It's that then that gives rise to this other argument. Well, the mom has a right to this relationship with her child and not to surrender it without being fully informed and fully consenting. And that's where, of course, where the adoption tie-in is. In that case, she is knowingly, willingly putting her child into the care of somebody else. She has a right to do that.
Yes.
But the law insists that she do this in an informed way, and she has a right to change her mind in a certain window of time. And so this is not a right that, in other words, that Harold Cassidy is inventing or CareNet is inventing. It's actually recognized in the law already. The independent existence of the child is recognized.
Right.
And the right of that mother to the relationship she has with that child is already established. It's just that, amazingly, it has never been brought into a real focus as competing with the so-called right to abortion. It's like the courts have never balanced these two liberties.
Yeah, like I said, there's some amazing case law out there that establishes a pregnant mother's fundamental intrinsic right to maintain her relationship with her child. That's actually the exact wording that we use there.
Yeah.
And I think another piece of this that we haven't talked about yet too is just the practices of the abortion industry, abortion clinics, that sort of lend to this idea that there is coercion that happens, right? So
Right.
coercion can take lots of forms. It doesn't necessarily have to be somebody holding a gun to somebody's head and saying, do this or else. Coercion can take a lot of forms, and that's also established in case law as well, right? And abortion clinics, because of their lack of being forthright about certain facts, right, about fetal development and options and other things, are contributing to the coercion that women often feel that I guess an abortion, either I have to have an abortion or an abortion is no big deal. I'm not actually, it's just a lifeless clump of cells, that whole thing. And the abortion industry has obviously pushed those ideas forward in order to maximize their profits, right? They're a profit maximization industry, like any other industry, right? And so that basically leads to coercion in many forms, right? And so again, because of that coercion, and because of the state's inability to protect women from that coercion, because of cases like, Casey and Roe,
Right.
we're this amicus brief is essentially saying that because Casey and Roe don't allow states to protect women and this relationship that they have from this coercion and other things, we need to put front and center this right that women have, as opposed to the other rights that abortion advocates have been talking about for so many years. And that's why I think, as you said at the top, it's a unique and really brilliant way of looking at it.
Yeah, it really is wonderful. And, you and I are both serving in frontline ways, these moms who need alternatives to abortion. And, we see it before our very eyes, but so many of our fellow citizens aren't aware of how many of these abortions are, in fact, forced abortions.
Yeah.
And so our friend, that other pro-life attorney I was thinking of, Alan Parker, has developed the Center Against Forced Abortion in America, and it's mentioned in the brief, and it's busy. It's helping so many people who are, they'll go to this abortion clinic and say, oh yeah, my boyfriend is forcing me, or my parents, they're going to disown me if I don't have this abortion. I mean, that's coercion.
Yeah.
And this is a big part of the argument that mom should not be coerced in this particular way, and the law has got to step in to protect her baby, and this right to the relationship she has with her baby.
Yeah, and I think what's happening in Texas right now is very illustrative of this as well. Obviously, on September 1st, this law went into effect in Texas that effectively prohibited abortions after 6 weeks. And our pregnancy centers in Texas have been basically telling us that, many of them, that the floodgates have opened. I mean, people are coming into the pregnancy centers now, desperate, scared, not knowing what to do. But many of them are saying things like, wow, I didn't know that this alternative existed. And so for the first time in their lives, they're being exposed to compassion and hope, right? And help and support around this unexpected pregnancy. And again, this is like subtle forms of coercion that the abortion industry has helped seep into our culture. That when you have an unexpected pregnancy, the only choice that you possibly could have is to have an abortion. And so if somebody doesn't know that there's any other option or help or anything available out there for them, they're going to feel as if they have no choice, right? And so pregnancy centers are out there actually saying, no, we can help you. There's help available. There are resources available. There are people here that can walk alongside you. And so the Texas law has really illustrated that. But I think the Texas law also illustrates something that's very, very important. And whenever, and as I said at the top, CareNet is a ministry, not a legislative advocacy organization. Whenever we're talking about legislative advocacy, I think it's really important for us to also talk about the fact that there needs to be a dual strategy here. There needs to be coordination between legislative advocacy and
Mhm.
the care side. Because when we achieve victories legislatively, that actually makes the care stuff even more important, right?
Yeah.
But unfortunately, often there is we check the box, we won the late legislative victory, yay, we won, time to move on, right?
Yeah.
And in fact, we've even heard of donors going to our Texas pregnancy centers and saying, so we won, right? We don't need to give you guys our money anymore to support the pregnancy center. And the
Just the
pregnancy center
opposite.
saying, no, we actually need your money more than ever.
More.
More than ever,
Exactly.
right? And that, I think that's a really dangerous thing that goes on in the pro-life movement. And I do
Yeah.
not think it is isolated. I think there has been so much of an emphasis among pro-life people on the political and legislative aspects of the pro-life movement that they sort of define their pro-lifedness in terms of political victories, that they
Mhm.
actually, so when those political victories happen, they think, okay, my work here is done. When in
Right.
fact, the work is actually just beginning when the legislative victory happens. And so that's why it's so critical that folks talk and communicate. So when there's legal advocacy happening and the care folks are going to become a lot busier, there needs to be some coordination that happens there. It's just so important.
And I want to thank you for bringing that point up, and I want to lend an exclamation point to it because this is this excellent brief is one of almost 80 pro-life briefs in this case to the
Yeah.
Supreme Court, and some of the others, as you well know, make the argument. For example, the brief that was submitted by Heartbeat International, the other network of pregnancy centers, and also we have a brief from Good Counsel Homes,
Right.
the maternity homes from Chris Bell,
Mhm.
and even the brief from Americans United for Life, the big legal group, are making the following argument. They're saying, look, Roe v. Wade is obsolete. And so is Planned Parenthood versus Casey. And one of the reasons is at the time of both of those decisions, you did not have the circumstances that prevail now, namely that the pregnancy centers far outnumber the abortion clinics in America. Because of the fact that they do, the court can no longer hide behind the reasoning that, well, women need abortion. We got to keep it legal because they need it. They don't need it. They've never needed it, but they don't need it even more now. And one of the reasons precisely is the support people have given and continue to give, volunteering, donating, publicizing the work of the pregnancy centers. That very work has now made it possible for legislators and courts to say we no longer need legal abortion. So the service work actually, while independent, technically independent of the legal work, the service work ends up becoming a legal argument, a motivation
Yeah.
for legislators and judges to do the right thing. So in that
Right.
sense, again, like you said, you get that donor out there. The donors need to understand now's the time more than ever to rally around these centers, to rally around groups like CareNet, and to say, look, we need you more than ever, and we're going to continue to need you because when the day comes, and it will come, that Roe v. Wade is a thing of the past, and that killing babies in the womb is no longer legal, there's still going to be pregnancies, and there's still going to be fear and doubt accompanying those pregnancies. We're going to have to be right there with those moms, with those dads, with those families. And we're grateful to CareNet for doing that so well in so many places over so many years.
Yeah, and I just to put another punctuation mark on that great comment. The way we kind of talk about it is, well, we ask a question: are we prepared to win? Right. We need to be prepared to win, and as you said, prayerfully, the day that Roe versus Wade gets overturned, that's not the end. That's just the end of the beginning, right?
Yes.
And then we move into this next phase where we have got to be prepared to provide the compassion, hope, and help, and frankly, the love of Jesus Christ to the millions of people that are going to need it when abortion is no longer as easy to get, unfortunately, as it is today. And so yeah, 100%. We the ministry work, the care folks, we need to be prepared, and the church, like I said earlier, the church really needs to to get more deeply and kind of hands-on involved in this work. There's 400,000 churches in North America. There's about 2,700 pregnancy centers roughly. So kind of do the math there. If just 1% of churches, 4,000 churches, intentionally started a pro-life ministry of, you can come to this church and we're not just going to send you down the road to a pregnancy center, which is great. That's awesome. But there's not pregnancy centers everywhere, right? Just 2,700 of them. There's 400,000 churches. There's lots of communities that have lots of churches, very few pregnancy centers, and lots of abortions, right? And so in those communities, who's going to be there to provide this compassion, hope, and help for women and men who need it? And from our perspective, the church is a huge part of that answer, as well as the expansion and scaling of the pregnancy center movement.
Exactly. Well, we thank you, Vincent. Friends, we've been talking with Vincent DeCaro, Chief Outreach Officer of CareNet. Vincent, underneath your name, we have the website care-net.org. And friends, we want to urge you to go there, learn about what these centers are doing, and get involved in supporting this outreach. Vincent, thank you for your comments today, your insights, and most of for your life-saving work. My best regards to the whole team over there at the leadership of CareNet.
Definitely will do. Thank you so much, Father Frank. Always just loved chatting with you, and it's been a pleasure. And let's just keep doing what we got to do, right?
Exactly. Onward to victory.
Thank you.
And speaking of that victory, friends, I want to invite you to go to SupremeCourtVictory.com. You can read all the briefs at that website, including the one from CareNet that we've discussed today. SupremeCourtVictory.com. You'll also find a prayer there that we invite you to say each day for victory in this Supreme Court case. And you'll be able to watch the videos of interviews like we've just done and interviews with other groups that have submitted friend of the court briefs. Please make that a resource as this big, important case continues to unfold at the U.S. Supreme Court. God bless you, friends. I'm Father Frank Pavone, National Director of Priests for Life. We will talk to you soon.